All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today is a very special edition, and we recorded some interviews on site at Palomar Airport at the Pinnacle Aviation Academy 20th anniversary celebration. Now, George and Sherry McJimsey are the owners of Pinnacle Aviation, and they're great people. I go back way back with them, actually the whole 20 years of their business, in fact. And the reason they started a flight school is because the large school that was on the field at the time closed abruptly one night because the owner of the school, who apparently was embezzling money from the corporation, decided to take the rest of the money and run in the middle of the night. So people got to work the next day and wait to find the door locked and the phone disconnected, and the owner, of course, nowhere to be found. Now, I was actually a student at this school at the time. I had just soloed, and I found myself with nowhere to train. But of course, that's nothing in comparison to the poor instructors that were working there, who found themselves without jobs and without a paycheck, actually, for probably what was their last few weeks of work. So George and Sherry saw an opportunity. And since they were already leasing airplanes to the school, they kind of swooped in and just made a new business out of what was left. So 20 years on, the place is still in business. And today they invited us out to do some recordings with the pilot recruiters from Envoy Airlines, with whom Pinnacle Aviation has a new Cadet program affiliation. And Envoy is the airline formerly known as American Eagle. And they're already known for having a flow-through program to mainline. And of course, they're not the only airline who does that, but it's obviously a huge incentive for a regional airline to have flow to the major for obvious reasons. But now they're taking it actually another step further, and they have a similar agreement for CFIs to flow from the flight school where they work directly to a regional airline where they've already been conditionally hired. So cadet programs, of course, are common in other parts of the world, but the U.S. domestic airline industry really hasn't done it this way for a number of reasons, and the not least of which is just that they didn't really ever have to. So we're going to sit down today with Scott Devers, and he's an Envoy first officer and a pilot recruiter, for a briefing on how they feel about the looming industry pilot shortage. And this interview, like I said, was really cool because we recorded it on board the ERJ that they flew into Palomar for a display during the festivities. And his part is all full of noise from the stuff going on around us. In the background, you're going to hear some cockpit noises. You hear the fuel truck pull up and some background conversations. There was a tour going on too. But if you're listening to this podcast, I think you're going to love it. And we're also going to have a talk with Jessica Hines. Now, she was the captain of this flight. And of course, she wasn't able to talk with us because as a pilot recruiter and the captain of the flight, she was busy giving tours of the airplane and talking to the owners of the school and talking to possible recruits for Envoy. So her interview is going to be over the phone instead, but she has an amazing amount of information that she's going to give us, and she does a lot for the industry, so definitely stay tuned for that. And we're also going to hear from George and Sherry, the owners of Pinnacle, for the true story of their flight school's beginnings and how it all actually went down, and more importantly, how they've managed to survive through two total economic cycles in an industry that suffers badly when times get tough. And I, of course, owe them special thanks because as these cycles were happening, I was out there trying to make a living, and a couple times things didn't really work out. But they were there to pick me back up as a flight instructor with a regular paycheck so that I could keep flying and keep having a house and keep having a car. So for that, I'll always be grateful to them. And they're going to tell us more about how they were able to weather more than a couple of storms and stay profitable during the past 20 years of business. So I'm excited. Let's get to it. And here's Scott Devers from Envoy giving us a briefing about the state of the industry.
Just real quickly, just so you know, we're coming up on the biggest pilot shortage of all time. After 9/11 happened, the airlines moved backwards due to the recession, just like the economy. They didn't hire one single pilot until the end of 2013 to replace an aging group of pilots. And the mandatory retirement age kept standing still. So all these pilots on board at the major airlines and regional airlines got older and older and older. Now they're in a world of hurt to hire and catch up. At American Airlines alone, there's 15,000 active seniority list numbers, so 15,000 active pilots. 7,500 of them have to retire by age 65 alone in the next 10 years. That's just at one company. If you throw United and Delta into the mix, they've got the same type of numbers. Of regional airline pilots out there, there's only 20 to 21,000 qualified regional airline pilots that meet the minimums for the majors. So this pool is quickly going to dry up. So what you're going to see for long is major airlines actually getting invested from their standpoint with their brand share and coming out and saying, hey, how do we start tackling these guys in high school and just reinventing the wheel to get people to look at aviation again and convince parents to help get their kids to go through pilot training and all. So a lot of good things are coming down the pipe. The movement is everything seniority based in the airline industry, and the movement is unreal right now. Compensation's going up. It's a great time to be getting in this game. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, those are some pretty positive words about hiring in the industry. And as he spoke, I found myself actually getting a bit jealous because things were nothing like that when I was on my way to the right seat of a regional. Next up, Scott tells us a little bit more about his journey to the right seat at what was then American Eagle.
I got the bug for flying back when I was 6 years old, and my uncle was career Air Force. He's got tons of time in F-16s and A-10s, and back pre-9/11, you could go in F-16 simulators and get a couple laps around the pattern or shoot down some bogeys and stuff like that. So I was hooked. That gave me the flying bug. And then I got to talking to him a little bit later as my career mentor coach kind of thing, as I got towards my end of my high school years trying to figure out what I was going to do for college. And he actually said, I think you'll do great in the Air Force, but the airlines you might find will be a little bit more towards my lifestyle was going for and what I was wanting to do with my life and my family. And so he kind of shooed me over towards Auburn University, where I graduated from in their flight management program. I got all my ratings through Auburn and graduated there in 2010 as a flight instructor out of their program, and then flew aerial surveillance in the state of Alabama to build some time. And then as soon as I met the minimums to get on at American Eagle, which is now today Envoy, I've been here ever since. I started March of 2011, so I just had my 6-year anniversary with the company.
Congratulations, 6 years.
Thanks.
So 6 years, you're an FO now.
I am.
Now, there are some airlines where I heard you can upgrade in a matter of months, and there are some airlines I've heard where it takes a decade.
This is true.
Shorter than that for guys that would be coming in now?
Now, for upgrade time, in terms of, it just depends on upgrade or transition time. So with us at Envoy, we guarantee jobs into American Airlines, meaning if you pass your interview with us at Envoy, you will be guaranteed a pilot job at American Airlines. So that's just a matter of seniority pool once you get on top of American. Into American. American takes so many off of our seniority list a month under a standard agreement. So of that, when you're on Envoy's seniority list, you'll spend half of your time as a co-pilot, first officer, and then half your time as a captain, PIC. And so what our projections are, just based on our movement agreements to American only, you will be a first officer with Envoy for 2.5 to 3 years, and then a captain for 3 years before you start over at American in the back door over there. There are other airlines. There's one I have some buddies at right now that are kind of anywhere 8 to 9 years. There's some that are 8-9 months. Where I'm comfortable at as a pilot myself is about a 2-year upgrade time. It was about 2 years of me flying this jet in the right seat before I decided I was probably comfortable enough to sit in the left seat and make sure I could comfortably get my passengers there safely and everything, and have a good head on my shoulders about what's going on when you're moving 5 times faster than you've ever flown in your life. So a lot of responsibility with upgrading a captain. So I think with our projection of numbers here at Envoy, it's right on cue. The maturity level of the pilots in terms of being familiar with our SOPs and policies, our route structure, our airplanes, our maintenance, it's great for you to fly a couple years before you actually upgrade to captain. Nowadays, as well, the airlines, the major airlines, when they're looking to hire, aren't putting as much emphasis on PIC jet time anymore. Well, I'm not going to say anymore, but not as much emphasis on that category.
Okay, that's fair. Now, as far as hiring from airlines, or hiring at the bottom at least, into the right seat at Envoy or wherever, you guys are here because this school put together a flow-through, or not a flow-through, but we'll call it an agreement.
Cadet
right?
program?
Yeah, cadet program. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if I were starting out in aviation today, and maybe I have my private, maybe I don't, but I'm kind of starting off in the bottom rung, I'm working on my certificates, maybe I'm trying to pick a flight school to go to, and obviously there is a plethora of choices that I'd be faced with when it comes to a flight school, both in terms of aircraft type that they fly, in terms of location, in terms of time to completion, and in terms of overall cost. But one of the things that a lot of people don't think about at the beginning, I know, is there an agreement with an airline? And some larger flight schools, I know, will sort of dangle a carrot in front of you, like, ooh, if you fly with us, we'll get you a job. But I don't know that that's something anybody can guarantee. But since you guys have a cadet program now, for instance, with Pinnacle, tell me a little bit about how that process would work for somebody who's come up through the ranks at a school like this. Maybe they were an instructor here, and then now they want to move on to the right seat of a jet. Yeah,
so the cadet program that we offer is an incentive for us to be able to start investing in the knowledge and training of future aviators. early off. So we actually found out about Pinnacle through a couple of students who were instructing here, and they actually pointed us in the direction of Pinnacle, and we reached out to George and Sherry, the owners here, and man, they've just been wonderful about receiving us with open arms and want to build on our relationship. And so what this program actually does is it allows us to tie in basic training. So even as early as a private pilot certificate, once you have that in hand, we can come out and begin some portions of your airline interview with us. We have a 2-stage airline interview process. That's an HR is the first step. Just it's kind of like a personality question kind of thing where I sit down with you and just get to know you, because we know you're going to go through more training and get more aviation experience, but we want to hire a certain type of personality here that fits our mold at Envoy and the American Airlines culture. So we use that as an assessment from a pilot giving the interview to a future pilot to know that, hey, yeah, this is a guy I want to be flying with on a 4-day trip, or if we have an emergency, I think we could work through our differences to be able to safely get everybody on the ground. So we'll do an HR interview at the end of your private pilot certificate, and then we'll mentor you, develop a mentorship up through instrument, commercial single, commercial multi. At the end of your commercial multi, we'll come back out and kind of home in some of those instrument skills that you've acquired and made proficient through commercial training. And we'll do a tech evaluation, which is the second part of our interview phase. And in that tech, we just kind of do some light instrument oral evaluation. We'll go ahead and be triggering you into thinking about how some of the instrument rules that the airlines operate on, and kind of getting you coached up to be thinking in that mentality when you're flying instruments in the future. And then once the instrument evaluation is done, basically your interview with us, the process is done, and we'll give you what's called a conditional offer. And with the conditional offer, that basically says, hey, you've completed the interview. Now basically you just have to get your time to work up to the minimum regulations we can hire you at. If you continue and stay on here at Pinnacle as a flight instructor, then we can actually go ahead and hire you as a flight instructor, but you'll be an Envoy pipeline flight instructor. Envoy Cadet instructor is actually what it's called. And we basically would subcontract you back to George and Sherry here. But the main difference in the job profile wouldn't really change. It's just that Envoy is now cutting you a paycheck, which would be the wages of whatever Sherry and George would pay you here at Pinnacle, but you get the Envoy benefits. So of the Envoy benefits, now you can be covered under our Envoy's medical, dental. You can start putting into our 401k accounts. You can start getting some scholarship money. We'll pay some scholarship incentives up to $5,000 just for you to continue to build time on top of whatever your hourly wages are. You get the travel benefits on the American Airlines network. So the travel benefits being standby travel for you, your family, your parents, 10 buddies on your buddy pass, to just anywhere American Airlines or American Airlines branded aircraft touches the ground. You can go right along on that for very minimum cost, if anything. A lot of perks to this.
That sounds incredible. I wish that existed when I was doing this.
No kidding.
Well, thinking back, my degree was similar to yours. It was in aviation, but more on the management side. Okay. And one thing that I thought was kind of neat was, when we're talking about hiring for any job, really. I mean, the ideal when you're going to recruit somebody is not so much that somebody has one shot, a couple hours, maybe a day or two to sort of prove themselves. You as a company have to make a decision on this guy and then move forward or not. Ideally, you would be able to have the time with an applicant or a cadet or whatever that you want to call them to learn what this person is about, to spend time with them, to follow them around in their day, observe how they solve problems, observe their personality, watch them grow as a pilot and as an adult. But normally in most recruiting efforts, you don't really have the ability to do that. So, you have a couple hours, maybe a sim check with someone, then you got to make a choice. Right. Are we going to hire this guy or not? Right. And, with a situation like this is something probably the closest I've heard to more like that ideal, where you've now got a picture that may span a couple of months or years with somebody, that you'll be able to pick up people that what they're about, where they trained, you've watched them solve problems, you've watched them be a flight instructor. And so by the time they're actually going, for their first day of training, and when they sit down in the right seat of the real thing, you've known what this person's about for years, and it would almost be like hiring a friend or hiring a family member or hiring somebody, but without all the fun stuff that would come along with doing that, of course. But you have a very clear picture of the type of individual you're getting.
Well, that's exactly right.
That's incredible.
We want to capitalize on that stuff too, the relationship. knowing someone. We're a family culture here at Envoy, and we want to make sure somebody can mold with our family. We get to learn these cadets and work with them and watch them thrive and take off really in the industry and in their learning. We learn their wives' names, their kids' names.
Absolutely.
And it just builds more of a profile and a picture so that we're cheering you on. When you actually end up in the right seat with us, we're like, hey, man, I watched you come through. We're glad to see you.
Absolutely.
Kind of
and they've been knowing what they're getting into this whole time. It's not they get there and suddenly this isn't what they thought or whatever. They know from day one. And so you guys have both made the conscious choice time and time again to build that relationship.
Right. And this is checks and balance too. If you get people come up, they'll have questions and say, should I be doing this? Should I get more multi-engine time? This kind of went squirrely with this flight school. What do you think about this? Well, then we can say, not a big issue. Yep, that's a big issue, and kind of help direct some of the focus there to make sure everybody's staying on track for the best kind of narrowest, quickest path, least resistance to get your end game.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been great. This information, like I said, I wish this existed when I was doing this. But for anybody out there listening who wants to get involved in this program, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, they can find us on our website for one. www.envoyair.com/pilots, and you can find any of our recruiter links on there. If you would like to get in touch with Jessica Hines, who is over Envoy, she's the point of contact for Pinnacle. She's Jessica, JESSICA .Hines HINES @AA.com, or myself, Scott Devers, Scott.Devers @AA.com, last name being DEAVERS. Feel free to reach out to us. Call our office, 972-374-5607. Ask to speak to any of our recruiters. We can talk to you and help you find the right path and the right profile.
As Scott was speaking, a small crowd of instructors started gathering around, and I haven't seen enthusiasm like that in a long time from a bunch of instructors about ready to get hired. Now, the captain of this flight, and she wasn't able to talk with us, her name is Jessica Hines, and we're going to hear from her in just a moment. She's going to tell us all about her journey to the left seat of the regional jet that we're sitting here recording on. And she's going to tell us a lot more about what else she does in the industry to help people reach that dream job and make a difference in aviation. All right, in this portion of the podcast, we're going to welcome Jessica Hines, and she was there at Pinnacle the other day, but unfortunately we couldn't get to talk with her because when she comes to an airport, is the captain of the airplane on display and is involved in pilot recruiting. She's achieved a celebrity status, and it was tough to get a hold of her. But anyway, she's here now with us on the phone, and Jessica, of course, is a captain, an ERJ captain at Envoy, and she's going to take us through her journey to the left seat and talk about her professional duties as a recruiter, as a line pilot, and whatever else she does. So, Jessica, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate the nice introduction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'd like to start off by telling you kind of how I got involved in flying. It's actually kind of a funny, weird story, but when I was in fifth grade, pre-algebra, I took a personality test. And it's kind of funny that an algebra teacher gave us personality tests, but in fifth grade. But at the end of my personality test, it said I should become a professional pilot or a dentist. I didn't think in a million years, because I didn't grow up with much. I grew up in a very humble surroundings in Pocatello, Idaho, that I could ever afford to train to be a pilot. So I grew up thinking maybe I could be a dentist. I didn't really think much about that again until I got into high school, my senior year of high school. I had this big urge. I'm a very curious person. I had this big urge to travel and see the world. And that kind of got me started on what professions I could do to travel and see the world. And one thing that I actually, and Brandon, you're going to think this funny, is kind of pushed me to be a pilot, is I took this class in high school, which allowed us to research several professions. One of the ones that I researched was air traffic control.
Oh, here we go.
And and so at the end, we did 6 papers on 6 different professions, and then I got to pick 2 to do a 10-hour internship with. And so I picked air traffic control and travel agent. So anything that would be, involved in aviation or traveling is what really piqued my interest. So I spent a 10-hour internship over several days in Pocatello, Idaho, Class D Airspace Air Traffic Control Tower. And I got to tell you, it's a slow airport. There's only a few flights that come in every day, including SkyWest service, and then of course people training how to fly. So I got pretty bored, and those 10 hours were pretty boring. So I started asking a lot of questions, being the curious person that I am, and I asked the controllers. I said, "Hey, what is the pilot doing here? Why is the pilot doing this? Why are they doing a rectangular pattern? Why do they slow down then and not here?" And he started teaching me about the traffic pattern and everything it involves to come in and to land. And it's at that moment that I wanted to be in the cockpit. I wanted to be a pilot, that I knew for sure that I wanted to do that. So I knew when I was in high school that my parents wouldn't be able to afford me to go to college. So I worked really hard at my grades. I tried my hands in sports because I knew I needed to get a scholarship. And I played basketball, ran track, cross country. I played volleyball. Volleyball was the best I was good at. I did the long jump, triple jump, everything. I was never the best at sports, even though I enjoy them. But I also knew that I could get a scholarship through good grades. So I worked really hard, and then I got straight A's in high school. I applied for several different scholarships at universities surrounding me, and Utah State gave me an academic scholarship so that I could go to Utah State and get all of my out-of-state tuition waived. So that was a big win for me. Boise State also offered me a scholarship, but I knew Utah State had an aviation program, so I went to Utah State. I found out that I could work with a counselor to get loans, and I got the loans to get me through my training. Training to be a pilot is not cheap. Utah State offers one of the best programs in the aviation industry at one of the lowest costs. So it was a great place for me to be and learn how to fly. It's an amazing place to learn how to fly because you deal with different kinds of weather, and you get to fly in the mountains. Mountain flying is a little more difficult and requires extra training than flying on flat land, maybe say in Florida and Texas. So I feel very fortunate to learn how to fly at Utah State. They're a great school. So if anybody's thinking about becoming a pilot, definitely check out Utah State University in Logan, Utah.
That sounds like you had a very involving and sort of multifaceted experience. It wasn't a sort of, I know people picture a collegiate aviation program as being sort of sheltering, but it sounds like you were kind of able to find a place that wasn't that way, and you could really go out and learn what flying in the real world in the mountains was all about.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great program. When I was going to college, you just had to get your commercial license and multi-engine rating, and up to that point, and then you could get hired at a regional airline. Well, times have changed in the last 10 years, and now you have several different things you have to go through to be a regional airline pilot and then move on to the major airlines. And so what I would recommend to anybody interested at this point is to look at a university where you can get a professional pilot degree. That allows you to come to regional airlines with a total of 1,000 total time. And then you graduate with a bachelor's degree in aviation. Bachelor's degree is not required to be a professional pilot, but it definitely makes you more marketable when you're applying for the major airlines. Your GPA at your college and high schools also make you more marketable at the major airlines. So do the best that you can while you're in college. And that'll help you get the best job, I guess, along your career. So you also wanted me to talk about my professional duties.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I do now.
Yeah. And so now that you've said, the way to sort of get through there and go, you put yourself into and through college, which Sounds like you had an incredible journey going through that, and you kind of tried a little bit of everything, but it ended up working out. But then now, tell us about how the cadet program at Envoy kind of is changing the mold for pilot hiring, and what your role is in that.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely do that. So the pilot shortage has been predicted for years, and it's because the baby boomers are getting ready to retire. To help combat that, the FAA extended the retirement age from 60 to 65. That helped for 5 years. But now the baby boomers are retiring, and it's going to get increasingly higher retirement rates until the year 2024. AirlineCentral.com is saying that in the year 2024, over 1,000 pilots a month from the major airlines will be retiring. And so the major airlines are not hurting at this point for pilots, but the regional airlines are hurting for pilots. Eventually the majors will, and they're seeing the shortage, and they need to fill their regionals because regional flying is essential, and they don't want to shrink that too much. So the major airlines, for example, American Airlines, which we're a wholly owned subsidiary of American Airlines, AAG, has seen the issue and is helping us recruit pilots in different ways that has never been done before, including the Cadet program and the RTP program. We are leading the industry on figuring out how to combat this shortage. The Cadet program is a really great program because we can employ flight instructors. And what I didn't talk about is after I graduated, you have to find a way to build your time because you're going to graduate college with about 300 to 350 hours. So you have to now get to 1,000 hours. So you need a way to get paid to do that because it can be very expensive if you pay for it yourself. So you can do it through maybe a Part 135 operator. But I recommend the best way to do it is through flight instructing because flight instructing helps you hone your skills. It makes you a better pilot because not only do you have to know the skills, but you have to know them so well that you now have to teach it to somebody else. So I would recommend to build your time as a flight instructor. So to help you, because flight instructor doesn't really pay that much, to help you, we can employ you as a flight instructor at Envoy while you're building your time. That the university or the Part 61 operator that you might be flight instructing for example, Pinnacle Aviation Academy is a Part 141 operator. We just signed a couple of days ago, which is a great school, and they have a great program with Liberty University. And so they pay basically. They set the pay rate, but they pay us to pay you. And when we are able to pay you, we can give you all the benefits that I get as a pilot, except for jump seat privileges, which includes starting your 401k. You get medical, dental. You're a company employee, so you start building company seniority, not pilot seniority, but company seniority, which means that you start building your vacation and start building your sick time or your sick bank. And you get travel privileges, which travel privilege is the best. American Airlines has the best travel privileges because it's first come, first served and not based on seniority. So that means if you're the first person to sign in for the flight, you're the first person to get to the first available seat in the back. Of course, it's standby. And so you're not guaranteed that seat unless the seat opens up or is available. And then once you become a pilot for Envoy, then you get the jump seat privileges. So it's a great program because it allows you, because we're giving you your medical benefits, it allows you now to be a full-time instructor. Most schools can't afford to pay for insurance, so they can only employ you part-time. But if you join the Cadet program, you can be a full-time instructor, and that means you get your hours faster, you get to a regional faster, which means you get to a major faster. So it's a great program. We also have the RTP program, which is helping rotorcraft pilots from the military become fixed-wing pilots. and then come to the regional airlines and then up to the majors. Envoy has a great way to get to the majors. We have flow through to American Airlines, which means no interview required. You flow to American when your seniority can hold it. It doesn't mean you have to flow. It's not going to keep you going to American. You can get hired off the street at American. You can get hired at Delta or United or Southwest or JetBlue or Spirit, Alaska, whomever you want to fly for. It's nice though if one of those major airlines that you want to fly for, if they're not American or American doesn't call you, if it's really American that you want, you will still flow through to American and be a major airline pilot, which is amazing. It's no interview required. It's just based on seniority. And we're predicting that you'll flow, the pilots that we're hiring right now are going to flow to American in about 6 years, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's more than fair. And as you're talking, I told this to Scott on board the plane the other day too. You've literally just pretty much given a play-by-play of, 15 years ago when I was a flight instructor and building my time, like we talked about it, that was what I would sit and think about. Like, why is there not a program like this? I mean, and then you just described perfectly what we all, I think, back in the day wish that there was. It's incredible. Do you think that this program and maybe others like it are going to be an adequate effort to fill all the empty seats at the regionals upcoming?
I don't know if it's going to be sufficient enough. I think that our efforts that we do as mentors make a big difference. So part of me being a recruiter is being a mentor. And so I volunteer a lot because I don't want to see this industry shrink or have to do all these things. I want to try to get young people thinking about being a pilot, kind of like my algebra teacher did when I was in 5th grade. It's really when you're in fifth or sixth grade that you start thinking about, what do I want to do when I grow up? Do I need to be serious about getting good grades, staying out of trouble? Those sort of things. So I like to volunteer. I do a lot of volunteer work every year I speak to this program called Expanding Your Horizons. And it's trying to expand young girls' minds into getting involved in a STEM career when they grow up. And so a lot of different professional females from any STEM field you can think of, including me being an airline pilot, to a doctor, to an astronaut, to a rocket scientist. They all meet one day in Houston, and these girls get to pick whose speeches they go and talk to. So my speech is becoming a professional pilot someday. And so I teach them about, the math and science involved in my job. And it's really neat because I start off the class and ask them, who here has ever been on an airplane? And maybe 4 raise their hand out of 20. And then you say, okay, well, who here has ever been in a little airplane? And maybe 1 or none raise their hands. And then I ask, who here thought they could ever be a pilot someday? And nobody raises their hands. And then I talk to them for about 40 minutes about the math and science involved in my job and how much I enjoy it. And at the end of the speech, I ask them, now who thinks that they can be an airline pilot? And over half, or 70, 80% of the class raises their hand, which is amazing. And it makes me feel good that I've opened up their eyes to the possibility of doing that as their career someday. I also get involved in Women in Aviation International. There's a Girls in Aviation Day, which boys and girls can come to, which is great. And then Envoy is actually, but through American, started Girls Soars Day, which I just did last week, where young girls could come with their parents and listen to different aspects, to 3 different speakers of professionals at American Airlines, including myself, to get them thinking about the airline someday. So I think that's essential besides the cadet program, besides the R2P program. We also recruit at Sun and Fun, which I'm going to tonight. We will be all day at Sun and Fun tomorrow to try to recruit pilots. So that's really exciting to go out, not only for me as a pilot to go to Sun and Fun, which is an amazing event, but also to go and represent my company at Sun and Fun and talk to these kids and young professionals, or maybe retired military thinking about going into the airlines now. And it's great to get to talk to all of them. And then we go to schools and universities. We have over 20 cadet schools across the country, and we go out there twice a semester, and we talk to them and we mentor them. We do interviews on site. That's also a great way. And we go to all these different aviation air shows and things to help getting people thinking about becoming an airline pilot someday. So there's a lot of things that we're doing, and we're hoping that the combination of everything that we are doing will help feed the pilot need here that we're already facing at this point.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I was going to ask you to maybe just talk us through some of your average duties that you do, but I think that based on what you just said, nothing that you're doing is average. That's all very powerful, commendable work, and not only for the industry, but for young women looking to get into a career, and people coming from the military, helping them get placement. That's amazing. So, you're going to turn out to be the go-to person in this entire industry pretty soon.
Yeah, well, I'm willing to help. So I think it's an important path that I need to take to help, the future of aviation.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to do it.
I have one last question for you. Are you glad that you chose pilot instead of dentist?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love being a pilot. After doing more research into dentistry, I knew that wasn't what I wanted to go into. And I'm so glad that I'm a pilot. The average day of flying, I just flew yesterday. I flew from DFW, where I'm based for Envoy, to Longview, Texas, and back. And then I flew to Brownsville, Texas, and back. And that's just a day trip. We also do 4-day trips. And sometimes you'll just do one leg a day. Sometimes you'll do up to 5 legs a day, which we call them legs, which means a flight. And it's fun. Sometimes you take off toward the sun and you get to see a sunset for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, depending on which direction you're going, or a sunrise. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous there. It's nothing like the sunsets and sunrises that you see on the ground.
It's definitely not like that
amazing
picture of a sunset they have at my dentist's office, that's for sure.
Exactly. The view from my office is a lot better, that's for sure.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad you picked pilot as well instead of dentist, and the fact that you had your epiphany in a control tower, that's pretty neat too. I'm sorry it's because you were so bored, but I'm glad you chose the right thing for you. That's incredible. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been great information. Thank you so much for both opening up personally and then also telling us about your professional career and how you're helping so many different people get established in a career in aviation. And I'm sure that they're all going to want to get in touch with you. So maybe you could let us know how we can do that.
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with me is through my email at jessica.hines@aa.com. And Hines is spelled H as in hotel, I as in India, N as in November, E as in Echo, S as in Sierra. Jessica.hines@aa.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me. Just because, if you try to call me or whatever, I might be in the air and not be able to answer. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. But I'm not trying to knock air traffic control. I think it's really neat, especially where you are, Brandon. It's so busy, and I imagine that you guys are just, you have no time to do anything else but to control these airplanes coming in and out of that airport.
Yeah, it all just depends on where you are. But I'll tell you what, you know how it's the old aviation saying about hours of boredom and then moments of sheer terror. It's kind of the same for us. There's lulls and there's peaks, and then you just never know when it's going to happen.
That's true. Every, I'm sure that every day for you and every flight for me, nothing is ever the same. It's always different. It's always a new adventure. You always have to be prepared for, the worst. And so you always want to make sure you're on top of your game and you're ready to go if that day ever happens.
Absolutely. So could not agree more.
Yeah. So it's constantly learning and, constantly adapting as well, which is fun. Never a dull moment.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, you know what? Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it. And your email inbox is about to blow up. So I hope you're ready.
All right.
All right, Jessica. Thanks for being on the show.
As soon as I can.
All right.
I do work hard and have a lot to do, but I do get back, as soon as I can. So I appreciate your patience in advance.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Brendan. Keep in touch. And, anybody has any questions, make sure to ask.
All right, guys, thanks for listening to Podcasting on a Plane. Now, I'm going to jump in here and split up this podcast into 2 episodes because there's just so much content here. We're going to be way over our time limit. But make sure to subscribe so that you can get next week's episode as soon as it comes out. And I've got a lot of other neat stuff coming down the pipe, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Now, as far as a podcast, I'd love to hear your feedback. Now, this is going to be work in progress for me, so let's keep it constructive, but I want to know what you think. If you have suggestions for show topics or individuals you want me to interview or something you'd just like to share, let me know. You can get in touch with me through our website. That's podcastingonaplane.com. And of course, we have a Facebook page too. And if you're liking what you're hearing, you can keep up by subscribing through iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. Now, subscriptions and ratings are how iTunes ranks its podcasts, so I ask that you please subscribe and rate us in order to help me give you the best content. Well, that's all for now. Thanks again for listening. Your frequency change is approved. Until next time, report back on this frequency for the next episode. Good day. The Podcasting on a Plane podcast is presented for entertainment purposes only. My comments and those of my guests, the website's content, and any of the social media, etc., are not part of my official responsibility as a controller or an FAA employee. The views and opinions you hear on the podcast are mine and those of my guests, and not necessarily that of the FAA. There is no nexus between Podcasting on a Plane and the FAA. Also, while I am a CFI, I'm not your CFI, nor am I your mechanic, your doctor, your shrink, or your spouse. This podcast is presented for entertainment, camaraderie, and fun, but is in no way, shape, or form professional advice. It's not legal counsel, and it's definitely not flight instruction. If you are in need of professional advice, get some from somewhere more appropriate than a podcast, no matter how good this one may be.